the first thing I noticed wasn't her face. It was the silence around her. In a ballroom filled with laughter, music, and glittering chandeliers, where wealth practically hummed in the air, she stood like a shadow no one dared step into. And when our eyes met, I felt something strange, like I had just walked into a story I wasn't supposed to be part of. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human connection, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be felt, not just heard. It was a cold evening in Manhattan, and I, Nathan Carter, had no business being there. The invitation in my hand felt heavier than it should have, embossed with gold lettering and the name of one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, Richard Holloway. I wasn't part of that world. I was just a freelance photographer barely scraping by, hired last minute to cover the annual charity gala after someone else backed out. My suit was rented, my shoes slightly too tight, and my confidence hanging by a thread. The venue was breathtaking. Crystal lights cascaded from the ceiling like frozen rain, and the polished marble floors reflected the elegance of people who had never known struggle. I moved through the crowd quietly, snapping photos, capturing smiles that seemed rehearsed and laughter that felt distant. It was all beautiful, but it didn't feel real. And then I saw her. She stood near the far corner of the room, away from the spotlight, away from the music. Her dress was simple compared to the others, a deep navy blue that hugged her figure modestly. But it wasn't the dress that held me, it was her face. Or rather, the way she tried to hide it. A faint scar ran along the left side of her cheek, starting just below her eye and trailing down toward her jawline. It wasn't grotesque, but it was enough to make people look away too quickly or stare too long. She had positioned herself carefully, her hair falling just enough to obscure it, her posture guarded like someone who had learned to shrink in a world that demanded perfection. I didn't know why, but I couldn't look away. Someone whispered nearby, and I caught fragments of the story. Her name was Claire Holloway. The CEO's daughter. The scar came from a car accident years ago, one that had taken her mother's life. Since then, she had rarely been seen in public. People spoke about her in hushed tones, as if her presence carried something fragile and untouchable. But what struck me wasn't the scar. It was the loneliness. The music shifted to a slower tune, couples drifting onto the dance floor. I raised my camera instinctively, capturing the swirl of movement, the elegance, the illusion of perfection. But every time I lowered the lens, my eyes returned to her. And then, without fully understanding why, I started walking toward her. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was crossing an invisible line. What would I even say? I wasn't part of her world. I was nobody. But something inside me refused to let me turn back. When I reached her, she noticed me immediately. Her eyes were sharp, guarded, almost ready to defend. I realized then how many times she must have been approached out of curiosity, pity, or worse, judgment. I didn't speak right away. I simply offered a small, genuine smile. There was a long pause, the kind that stretches time. And then, with a quiet boldness I didn't know I had, I extended my hand. For a second, she didn't move. Her eyes flickered, searching my face for something, mockery, maybe, or hidden intentions. But I had none. I just saw a person standing alone in a room full of people, and it didn't feel right. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she placed her hand in mine. The dance floor felt different the moment we stepped onto it. Conversation softened. I shifted. I could feel the weight of attention pressing against us, but I ignored it. All that mattered was the rhythm, the movement, and the fragile connection forming between us. She was stiff at first, her movements cautious, like she was afraid of making a mistake. But I guided gently, not leading, not forcing, just allowing her to follow the music at her own pace. And then something changed. It was subtle at first. A slight relaxation in her shoulders. A breath that came easier. Her steps grew more fluid, more confident. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about how she looked. She was just moving. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The music spoke for us. Her eyes met mine again, and this time, there was something different in them. Not just caution, but curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of trust. As the song continued, the world around us seemed to fade. The whispers, the judgment, the expectations, they all disappeared. There was only the dance. And for a moment, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. When the music ended, the room erupted into polite applause, but it felt distant. She stepped back slightly, her hand slipping from mine, and for a second, I thought the moment was over. But then she leaned in just enough for her voice to reach me. "I won't forget you." The words were soft, almost fragile, but they carried a weight I couldn't fully understand. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like she had never been there at all. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I finished my work, handed in the photos, and left the venue with a strange ache in my chest. I kept replaying that moment, the dance, her smile, her words. I didn't expect to see her again. But life has a way of surprising you. A week later, I received an unexpected call. It was from Richard Holloway's office. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why would someone like him need anything from me? But it wasn't a mistake. He had seen the photos. Specifically, the ones of Claire. There was something different about them, he said. Something real. Something he hadn't seen in years. He wanted to meet. When I walked into his office, I expected intimidation. Power. Authority. And yes, it was all there. But beneath it, there was something else, worry. A father's worry. He told me about Claire. About the accident. About how she had withdrawn from the world, building walls no one could break through. Therapists had tried. Friends had tried. Nothing worked. But that night, something shifted. She had asked about me. Not out of curiosity, but with something deeper. Hope. He didn't ask me for much. Just to come by occasionally. To talk. To help, in whatever way I could. I didn't feel qualified. I didn't have the answers. But I remembered her smile. And I couldn't say no. The first time I saw her again, it wasn't in a ballroom. It was in a quiet garden behind their home, where the noise of the city couldn't reach. She looked surprised to see me, but not uncomfortable. We didn't talk much at first. Just simple things. The weather. Photography. Music. But slowly, over time, those conversations grew deeper. She began to open up, not all at once, but in small pieces. She talked about the accident, about the guilt she carried, about the way people looked at her differently afterward. How she had started to believe she was broken. And I listened. Not to fix her. Not to give advice. Just to listen. Weeks turned into months. And with each passing day, I saw her change. The walls didn't disappear overnight, but cracks began to form. She laughed more. She stepped outside more. She started to believe, just a little, that she deserved to be seen. One evening, as we sat in that same garden, she looked at me with that familiar intensity. "You didn't see the scar first," she said quietly. I shook my head. "I saw you." There was a long silence, filled with something unspoken. And then she smiled again. Not the fragile smile from the ballroom, but a stronger one. A confident one. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share. You never know who might need to hear it. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act can make a difference. Because sometimes, it's not grand gestures that change someone's life. Sometimes, it's a single dance. A moment of courage. A decision to see someone not for their scars, but for who they truly are. I went to that gala as a nobody. But I walked away as someone who mattered, to her. And in the end, that changed everything.